The Philippines, as I'm sure you all know, is a champion of the GCM and has long been a champion of protecting the rights of migrant workers and an example for others for protection at all points on the migration journey, from pre-departure to destination to return. So I'd like to ask, what are your country's priorities to strengthen protection worldwide? And what do you think we've learned during the pandemic from measures taken like the use of visa extensions, temporary residence permits, regularizations, and others? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Philippine government is delighted to be part of this first IMRF. Our commitment to implement the GCM in the Philippines has been reflected in the new Chapter 21 of the country's Blueprint for Development, the Philippine Development Plan entitled Protecting the Rights, Promoting the Welfare, and Expanding Opportunities for Overseas Filipinos. It serves as the domestic implementation of the GCM, providing coherence to ongoing migration work and improving overall migration governance. In just 3 years since the adoption of the GCM, and in spite of and despite of the COVID-19 pandemic, we enacted the law establishing the Department of Migrant Workers, a new government agency consolidating existing key offices with migration-related functions into a single streamlined entity. From recruitment, on-site assistance abroad, skills development, to reintegration in the Philippines. This has made the Philippines the first country in the world to include in its domestic law an explicit provision on the progressive realization of the 23 objectives of the GCM. We have transformed the 23 objectives from a moral imperative to a state obligation. A notable partnership for the Philippine government is the Joint Program on Bridging Recruitment to Integration in Migration Governance, or the BRIDGE program, with the UN country team, where the Philippines was granted $1.2 million by the Multi-Partner Trust Fund for GCM implementation. These developments are essential as we exercise our mandate to protect over 10 million Filipino migrants around the world. The Philippine government puts a premium in migrant protection no matter the cost, especially during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the first time that almost 2 million Filipinos had to return to the Philippines. With this short period of time, and with our COVID-19 response heavily anchored on 5 Rs: relief, repatriation, recovery, return, and reintegration. Our borders remained open for those coming home. We also facilitated the expatriation of foreign nationals who were stranded in the country, even organizing sweeper flights to bring them to various international gateways. To jumpstart the mobility of our Filipino migrants, we have been relentless in ensuring an efficient rollout of the vaccination program and issuance of the vaccination certificate called VaxCert-PH, which is compliant with WHO international health standards. With Philippines having the largest number of seafarers serving the world's merchant and cruise fleets, the Green Lane policy for seafarers was established to allow crew change in ports while minimizing COVID risks. These pathways, cultivated for the mobility of Filipino migrants, complement the country's campaign to seek reforms of the kafala system, a sponsorship system that may result in the worker being trapped in slave-like conditions. Under kafala, workers are bound to their employers or sponsors during the duration of their contract and are not allowed to transfer to another employer, go home, and leave their employers without their sponsors' consent, even if there's already wage theft and despite poor and abusive working conditions. Cooperating with partners to seek reforms to the kafala system echoes our call for fair and ethical recruitment and labor mobility, particularly in the Middle East, where there are more than 2.4 million Filipino migrant workers. When Bahrain introduced its Flexa visa system, the Philippine government invested at least $1.5 million to purchase Flexi visas for 1,075 Filipino migrants that resulted in their visas not being tied to a specific employer. We are probably the only country in the world that spends government funds to regularize its citizens. We also welcome Saudi Arabia's labor reform initiative to improve labor mobility of migrant workers. Bilateral agreements among states and international organizations are also ideal to formalize partnerships for the benefit of overseas Filipino workers aligned with the GCM. The Philippine government has thus far signed over 50 bilateral labor agreements and 5 regional agreements. On the one hand, the bilateral agreements include general deployment and protection of domestic workers, government-to-government arrangement for recruitment and deployment of caregivers and hotel workers, and deployment via private recruitment agencies. On the other hand, the regional and multilateral agreements were those with ASEAN, Europe, Canada, and the UN in recent years. Colleagues, our work to implement the GCM since 2018 all leads to today's IMRF. I would like to take this opportunity to thank member states, the UN Migration Network, and partners in civil society for the relentless cooperation in protecting migrants in these very trying times. The Philippines has breathed life and embraced the GCM as seen in our laws, policies, and our bilateral and multilateral engagements. This exact moment is monumental for every one of us present here. Let us all continue to inspire and encourage each other to advance the GCM with the same dynamism, support, and willingness that we have been practicing for many years. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Arriola. That was incredibly comprehensive and inspiring. I turn now to Michelle